We believe everything we see, we hear, we smell, taste are real. We say, yes, they're real. They're right in front of me. I can touch them. But is it really so? And if they are not real, am I real? If I'm not real, what am I? Who am I? Hi, I'm Elaine. Today I'd like to explore on the topic of who am I? To answer this question, I would first refer to this brilliant, wise teacher, Sakyamuni Buddha. Then I'll check out what the science says. 2,500 years ago, Sakyamuni Buddha said that everything, including us human beings, are empty. Buddha said that all appearances are not what they appear to be, and that we all live in illusion. In the field of science, in the 20th century, Albert Einstein onwards, physicists have concluded that the reality is all an illusion. Physicist Stephen Hawking said that the matter in the universe is ultimately zero. The new discoveries in the 20th century in the field of quantum physics shocked the world because the outcome goes against everybody's common sense, except the Buddhists, because that's what they've learned all along. The Buddhists are only glad to see that the modern science is speaking their language, this 2,500-year-old Buddhist language, and that science is helping to interpret and decode the complex teachings of the Buddha. Some people ask when they hear Buddha said everything's empty. They say, what does it mean? I'm not empty. I'm sitting on this solid chair with a solid body. What does it mean that everything's empty? When Buddha said that everything's empty, he didn't mean that things do not exist, but rather that they do not possess an independent, inherent, unchanging nature. Everything is interdependent. Everything is interconnected. They may or may not exist while they go through the process of dependent origination. According to the doctrine of dependent origination, some translate to dependent co-arising, which is the center and the key teaching of the Buddha. It means all things exist depending on conditions, depending on something else to exist. Nothing exists in any autonomous, enduring manner. If this exists, that arises. If this does not exist, that does not arise. A simple example is a plant arises from a seed. It needs the conditions of having soil, water, sunlight, and air. Without these conditions, the plant will not grow because the conditions are not met. Everything, including us humans, are all conditioned phenomena. The process of dependent origination happens every single moment of our lives. Our actions affect the lives of both ourselves and others, and the others also affect us. Everything is interconnected. Everything is subject to change and impermanence and emptiness because of the conditions. Most of the Buddhist doctrines we covered today are complex, certainly include this doctrine of dependent origination. They require deeper analysis. However, for the purpose of today's topic, we will cover their general concepts and will go into details in my future episodes. Some scholars say that the translation from either Pali language or Sanskrit language to the Chinese word kong, an English word emptiness, is not really accurate. However, they also agree that they couldn't find another word more accurate to replace this translation. In the Buddhist scripture, Samyutta Nikaya, Sutta number 85 within Samyutta number 35, Buddha explains in what way the world is devoid of anything that can rightly be called self. In a sutta, Venerable Ananda went to the Blessed One and asked, Lord, in what respect is it said that the world is empty? Buddha said, insofar as it is empty of a self or of anything pertaining to a self, thus it is said, Ananda, that the world is empty. And what is empty of a self or of anything pertaining to a self? The eye is empty of a self or of anything pertaining to a self. Forms, eye consciousness, eye contact is empty of a self or of anything pertaining to a self. The same goes with the ear, nose, tongue, the body, and the intellect. The intellect is empty of a self or of anything pertaining to a self. Ideas, intellect consciousness, intellect contact is empty of a self or of anything pertaining to a self. Thus, it is said that the world is empty. If you're confused here as to why Buddha refers to our six senses here in explaining emptiness, please allow me to explain 6 sense bases and 5 aggregates in a few minutes. Let's continue to discuss the doctrine of emptiness. In the field of science, we now know that all things, including human bodies, are made up of atoms. These atomic particles include molecules, protons, and neutrons. We are, in fact, a cluster of atoms. So are everything else. Moreover, modern physicists see that everything, tables, chairs, flour, food, etc., including human bodies, are made up of 99% or even more empty space. Only 1% or even less is made up of matter. The scientists say that when we are sitting on a chair, due to the fact that 99% of our body is empty space, we are in fact floating above the chair. There's a bit of distance between us and the chair. We are not really attached to the chair. Some people ask, if this 99% are empty space, why don't atoms collapse? It's because the 99% which contains protons and neutrons is energy. And it's more like patterns of forces, and the forces prevent other particles from occupying that space. The reason you feel solidity is the interaction of forces and repulsion between atoms. They push away from each other, like magnets are the same polarity. Therefore, what holds all matter is the presence of fluctuating energy. It's all energy that make up the solidity. This is the physicist's view. Biologists see the human body in terms of the contents of cells and DNA. And interestingly, scientists of the 21st century see the human body as basically a computer program. The teaching of illusion. Under quantum mechanics, universe is not locally real. The so-called non-local realism applies to everything, including our human bodies. So we're not locally real according to quantum mechanics. This sounds so very abstract and very confusing to the most of us who are not in the field of science. Let's see if we could put them in simple language. Basically, it means that a thing or a system such as our bodies cannot be described as having definite properties that are solely influenced by its immediate surroundings. Influence can be transmitted instantaneously across large distances. Remember we said earlier that everything is made up of particles. So here says that particles in different objects can be correlated in a way that they potentially influence each other instantaneously regardless of distance. And these particles, they seem to communicate with one another, no matter how far the distance. Albert Einstein famously called this spooky action at a distance. So A particle in the US can influence another particle, say in Africa or anywhere in the universe. When quantum mechanics say that universe is not locally real, it is saying that the reality is an illusion. Many of the quantum mechanics discoveries, such as quantum entanglement, wave-particle duality, can find parallels in many Buddhist teachings, such as doctrine of dependent origination, cause and effect, and karma. I'd like to point out that although there are many parallels found between science and Buddhist teachings, they focus on different things. Buddha's focus was on improving the human internal conditions, which is more on the subjective world, while science focuses on studying the external and objective world. Back to our discussion that the science says reality is an illusion. Let's see what Buddha said. Diamond Sutra is one of the most popular Mahayana scriptures. And the most famous verses in Diamond Sutra say that all conditioned phenomena are like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow, like dew or a flash of lightning. One should observe them as such. We cannot hold on to an illusory self, just like we cannot hold on to a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow, morning dew, and lightning, because they vanish in an instant. Just like Einstein said, reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. We are part of the reality. We too are illusory, albeit a very persistent one, until we're not. Some of us last longer, some don't. Buddha tells us to not cling or attach to what is unreal, like a self. He said that the concept of a self is an illusion that leads to an ego, a sense of self-importance, which leads to the misconception of the nature of a true self. And ultimately, it leads to suffering. As we said earlier, everything is subject to change and impermanence. So things like money, material possessions, fame, relationships, love, family, career, our looks, beauty, appearances, they are constantly changing. Some are more persistent than others, so because they are temporarily persistent, we think they're real. Some of us live our lives believing that the source of happiness lies in the outside world, and so we seek happiness from all these exterior things like money, material possessions, fame, relationships, looks, etc. We let our happiness depend on things that are constantly changing, that are out of our control. Like we love money, and we go to great lengths to make money, to make sure that money grow and stay in my possession. But money has wings. It goes wherever it wants and stay however long it wants. And sometimes the more you want it, the more it runs away from you. The same goes with all other mundane desires such as fame, relationships, looks, so on and so forth. In other words, we let our happiness depend on an illusion. Chances are they're not going to go the way we want them to. Then we're doomed to suffer. Let it be. If we have accumulated in the past or in our past lives the karma to have fortune, to have these mundane enjoyments in this life, enjoy them within reason. Go with the harmonious flow of the universe, but don't grow attachment to them. If we don't have them in our life, let it be. It'll all pass. Start accumulate good karma now. Do not suffer over these illusions. Not only it's not worth it in a secular sense, considering the time, money, effort spent, But also, these attachments to suffering will also trap us in the cycle of suffering and cycle of birth and death. Do not hold on to these illusions. Do not get trapped. Doctrine of non-self. Doctrine of non-self is sometimes called not self or no self, depending on different translation. Anatta in Pali language means discourse on the mark of non-self. Anatman in Sanskrit language means no self or non-self, or more broadly, insubstantiality. There are different opinions in the academic field on the doctrine of non-self or no self. The primary reason is that Buddha is famously known to have declined to answer questions of metaphysical nature, such as the existence of beings, the existence of God. The reason for his refusal to answer these questions is that they are outside of humans' cognizable areas and therefore does not constitute discussable or meaningful discourse. Buddha's teachings focus on the phenomenological level of our life experience, and he teaches how the human mind works to help alleviate human suffering and how to relate and respond to the worldly phenomena. So does non-self mean that you are not yourself? Buddha said, you are not who you think you are. You might think yourself as this body, but are you your body? Human bodies are subject to the natural processes of aging and mortality. We cannot attach or cling to this cluster of atoms on ourselves. The body is only a congregation, an organization of many impermanent elements. We use this body as the designations of selves, but it's like a piece of a temporary property that we borrowed from the universe for this life. So you are not your body. Some may say, well, I've been living in this body all my life, and I have my own unique features, and that's how people recognize me. In addition, I have my own DNA, and also my government-issued IDs with my name and birthday on them, which are different from other people. So I am myself. Even if I have this body of atoms temporarily, it's still mine. It's my body. If you are your body, you should have full control of your body. Do you? Not really. It gets sick when it does, and it does so without your approval. Not only they're not within our control, we don't even know how our bodies come to be like this delicate biochemical systems. How did I come to be like this? Having 6 senses to see, to talk, to hear, to eat, etc. And how did I come to look like this? How come I'm not prettier and taller? You ask your mom, the person who gave birth to you. She doesn't know. No one knows. Our body cells contain profound knowledge, even more intelligent than AI, the artificial intelligence. Your heart knows how to pump blood through the body's blood vessels. Your lungs know how to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide with the blood. When we sleep, it knows how to repair our cells. And your body does all these on its own without your knowledge. According to the study, the cells regenerate and every cell in the body is replaced every 7 to 10 years. So in 7 to 10 years, we have a brand new body. But most of us don't even know this is happening in our bodies. We just live in this temporary hotel, not knowing how it's operating. Like some of us drive a car, not knowing how the engine runs. The hotel, the car, they have their own minds. So our bodies don't really belong to us. They're like a car, a hotel that we use. They're not us. Having said that, we are very grateful for their accompanying us in experiencing these life journeys of ours. We have our bodies as the hardware part of us human, and our minds are the software. The hardware will expire, but the software will not. Let's now look at how the software, which is our human mind, works. 6 sense bases and 5 aggregates. I promised that I will come back to talk about 6 senses earlier when we were on Samyutta Nikaya on the doctrine of emptiness. So now we're going to discuss 6 sense bases and 5 aggregates. You know how sometimes we have some kind of aha moment? 6 sense bases and 5 aggregates were my aha moment when I first took Buddhist classes years ago. These 2 teachings helped me so much in understanding Buddhism. I hope they will help you too. Buddhism posits that the relationship between human life and the universe is formed through the interplay of the 6 sense organs, 6 sense objects, and 6 consciousnesses. Think about it. That's how we communicate with the world. Without them, we cannot form a relationship with the world. 6 senses. The 6 senses refer to the 6 sensory organs capable of generating sensations. They are the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. 6 objects. The 6 objects refer to the 6 sensory objects. They are the form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental objects. 6 consciousnesses. The 6 consciousnesses refer to the 6 types of awareness or recognition that arise when the 6 senses come into contact with the 6 objects. They are the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. The process goes like this. There is the eye, which is the internal base, and a visible object, which is the external base, with contact or a sense impression, like see, touch, smell, taste, hear. Between the sense door, well, we sometimes call it the sense door because it's the entrance to our sensory experience. So with the contact between the sense door and the external object, consciousness arises, followed by feeling. The moment of consciousness happens too quick for us to catch, while the feeling tone can be more easily known and apprehended. The 6 senses are the physiological organs: the eyes, the ears, the nose, and the rest. The 6 objects are the physical world, like the table, the chairs, food, people. And the 6 consciousnesses are psychological functions representing a different level of awareness and cognitive processing. These 3 together constitute the entire world. Let's now look at 5 aggregates. The 5 aggregates, aka 5 skandhas. The 5 aggregates are the components that constitute what we conventionally consider as the self. Now we're halfway into answering the question, who am I? For now, before we find our real self, our true nature, we are the 5 aggregates. We have so far concluded that we're not our bodies. Now we're going to see why, for the most of us, we are the 5 aggregates, an illusion of self. The 5 aggregates are form, feeling, perception, mental formation, and consciousness. Let's see how the 5 aggregates form an illusion of a self by looking at how our human minds process. Form aggregate. Form refers to matter or object. The form aggregate represents all tangible and material phenomena, including our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. The first process is where we receive the exterior object without discrimination. We see something, we hear, we smell. It purely accepts any phenomena occurring in the body and mind. receiving the raw data of various experiences without assigning names or making value judgments. Feeling aggregate. This refers to the sensations or feelings that arise from contact with external objects, which can be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The second process involves distinguishing the raw data received. It evaluates the input data, giving it positive, negative, or neutral value. Every time information is received, feelings arise immediately. Feelings signal that something is happening. If we refrain from evaluating the information, the feelings remain neutral. However, once we make value judgments on the input data, feelings become pleasant or unpleasant. Perception aggregate. This refers to the process of perceptions, mental images, and labeling the sensory experience obtained by analyzing the feelings that arise from external stimuli. Such perception is based on past experiences. Mental formation or mental fabrication. This involves the volitional actions and intentions that arise from the recognition of external objects, like thoughts, intentions, and other mental activities, including volition and habits. If the feeling is pleasant, we desire to prolong or intensify this experience. If the feeling is unpleasant, we desire to terminate it. This results in habitual reactions of liking or disliking. Consciousness aggregate. This primarily refers to the function of human awareness or consciousness that arises based on the previous aggregates, the sensory contact and mental activities. The sensory contact is from the first aggregate, form, pertains to physical matters or phenomena. The mental activities are from the remaining four aggregates, are the mental phenomena. We consider the five aggregates as the self, and I always call us humans walking mental fabricators. Let's now see an example how the five aggregates process.
Form aggregate.
You see a coworker walking towards you. A raw data received. Feeling. Unpleasant feeling arise. You feel intimidated. Perception. Based on past experience, you recognize and label this person as a bully. Mental formation or mental fabrication. A narrative formed. I better walk the other way. Consciousness. Your consciousness receives and are aware of all these inputs like a mirror reflecting what's out there. The process develops very subtle and so quickly, like a flash or lightning, that we can't really perceive the actual events happening. Only when a specific kind of habitual reaction repeats over time, forming a strong mental state, can we become aware of it on a conscious level. These aggregates are constantly changing and interdependent. The sense of self is an illusion created by this continuous flow of mental and physical processes. But upon closer examination, they are dynamic processes that arise and pass away moment by moment. Again, like what Einstein said, reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. This is described in the Buddhist teaching as a burning candle. The candle flame looks as something continuous and unchanging. But if we look closely, we'll understand that it's just a momentary flame produced by the burning wick, immediately replaced by a new flame, continuously. It is exactly this deeply rooted, fixed, fake belief of a self that created an ego, which give us the illusion of a self and make us suffer. Buddha called five aggregates the I-making and my-making process. As the five aggregates pursue its desires, The experience of being you is being created. But this is a fake self. It's not the real you. 5 aggregates are a very useful tool to help us understand who we are and that we are imprisoned by them. It is these 5 mental factors that take part in the rise of craving and clinging, ultimately cause suffering. Some may ask, why would people want to attach to suffering? It's like a moth to a flame. We humans sometimes have an irresistible attraction that can lead to self-destruction, to suffering. We cling to these aggregates. Somehow we think it'll pay off. So there's calculation going on in our human mind. Is it worth it? No. Clinging will only cause suffering. All of the world's problems stem from a delusion. The fundamental delusion of the 5 aggregate mind leads you to believe in a self. The delusion is, I am the separate individual. You let this fake you, or I call the 5 aggregates you, control your emotions in your life. Like Pinocchio, someone's always pulling the strings behind the scenes. Quantum physicists say that everything in the universe is an illusion, including us human beings. They analogize our human perception to us wearing a VR headset, which is virtual reality headset. It's a great analogy. When you put on a headset to view 3-dimensional images, it lets you experience a simulated reality, immersing you in the experience, where you can climb mountains, dive into the sea, or even experience the courtly lives of nobility that you are always curious about. However, interestingly, today's scientists tell us that our world is essentially a virtual reality, entirely composed of particles and manifested by our thoughts and consciousness. Essentially, the space we inhabit and everything, every object in the world is not truly real. Through this VR headset, what we see is all illusion. This VR headset, scientists say, is just like Buddhist teachings of 5 aggregates. The moment we put on the VR headset, or I call it the 5 aggregate headset, it localizes ourselves within our own activity. And through that headset, we look out through the perceiving faculties of our limited mind. Well, since we live in this 3-dimensional world, our minds are limited. So we look out through the perceiving faculties of our limited mind, seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and smelling. When we wear this 5 aggregate headset, it creates a fake self, which in turn creates endless suffering. All suffering are created by 5 aggregates. The teaching tells us not to cling to our feelings, perceptions, and mental fabrications. We grow up believe that both of the interior world and the exterior world are real. In our interior world, we have emotions like joy, anger, sadness, happiness, sometimes neutral. In the exterior world, we see mountain, river, land, all kinds of people, all kinds of things. All the exterior things are only manifestation of our mind. From the 5 aggregate virtual reality headset that we wear. But virtual reality possesses no independent, unchanging nature. They are empty. They only exist phenomenologically. We will never be able to see the real world using our human, limited, cognitive mind. For example, when I see you, I can't see the real you. The you that I see is a manifestation of a phantom from my mind, an image that looks like you. You are an entity made up of a group of temporarily organized, independent elements. We all are. And some of us stay organized longer, and some vanish sooner than others. But we humans attach a lot of meanings and labels onto this entity. Mr. A is successful and he's a big shot. Mr. B is a loser and is worthless. A is smart, B is dumb. A is handsome, B is ugly. Skinny, fat, the list goes on. But once when you realize that these are a manifestation of a cognitive phantom from your mind, they are not real. They are all empty. Then you will not attach or cling to them. With the 5 aggregates, the VR had said, we create our own illusory world. We grow attachments and we cling to this illusion. We are trapped in this 5 aggregates dream, and we can't wake up. We just can't wake up from it. So how do we get out of this? How do we get out of this trap to find the real self, to find our true nature? How do we let go of the attachments to the 5 aggregates? The answer is by removing the discriminative judgments. If we refrain from evaluating the information, the feelings remain neutral. Practice being like a mirror, receiving the raw data without making any judgment. By practicing this way, using these psychological techniques to cultivate yourself, you reprogram yourself. You cut off the clinging and desire. You drop your ego and the suffering attached to greed, anger, and ignorance. Your true nature is like a body of clean water. When your mind is full of thoughts, narratives, and judgments, they are like raging waves, and they bring in the mud and turn the clean water into turbid water. Buddhist practice is to make the waves stop and let the mud settle down, and let go of the external fame, money, material possessions, relationships. Let go all the gains and losses. Then you can see the clean water. Your true nature reveals. You find the real you, your true self. We are all part of the universe's oneness. You and I are like waves within a vast ocean. Each wave rises and falls, appearing separate, but it's never apart from the ocean itself. It's the same with us humans. Our individual lives rise and fall, but we're always part of the same interconnected universe. This energy flows through us in a constant cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, except when nirvana is achieved. There's no fixed, unchanging self moves between lives, but the continuum continues. Our consciousness is just a part of this endless, moving energy. So, while we may feel separate, in truth, we are one and the same. Just as a wave returns to the ocean, our energy too will return to the universe, continuing as part of the whole. So, what's the answer to the question, who am I? We have explained that you are not your body and you are not your 5 aggregates. When we realize that 5 aggregates are all empty and become enlightened, our true nature reveals. So, your consciousness without the contamination from the 5 aggregates is your true self, which is an inseparable part of the universe. That's who we are. That's who I am. Thank you for watching, and I hope you find this video helpful. May you enjoy freedom from suffering. I look forward to seeing you in my next episodes. Goodbye.